what to do if you feel like maybe a relative or someone you know has been injured at a residential care facility for the elderly. So in California, there's different levels of places where the elderly can be if they have some sort of illness or they're no longer able to care for themselves independently at home. And one of these is called a residential care facility for the elderly. And it's a place, it's basically like assisted living, and they have different levels of care. Sometimes they have a dementia component where they help provide care for people with dementia, or it could just be basically a form of assisted living. A couple key notes about these facilities: they are typically not a medical facility. Why is that important? Well, in California, there are extra regulations and limitations when you sue a medical facility. RCFEs, that's the abbreviation for them, they're not a medical facility, so they are not subject to the same regulations or limitations when you sue them as compared to like a skilled nursing facility. First, if you feel like there's some danger to the person living there, or if you are in one of these facilities and you feel like there's a danger to you, you can complain to the government entity that licensed them. It's probably the Department of Social Services, so the California Department of Social Services. They will send someone out, they'll do an investigation, they'll write a report. Sometimes, the reports are not as thorough as we would like, or there could be other issues, but what's good about that is they will send someone out and they'll start speaking to the facility and the people who work there, and we'll get information pretty early on about, what happened, and they'll do an investigation that can be helpful. So that's probably the first step. You also want to document any sort of injuries or dangerous conditions. So let's say there are you suffered a fall because they weren't providing enough supervision or assistance while walking. You want to document like the injuries, make sure that the person gets medical treatment, things like that. Another thing that you can do is request access to the records. So they should have some records documenting, for example, a fall, who observed it, what's their side of the story about what happened, and you should be able to get those records. If they don't provide the records or they're trying to hide things, then it may be time to hire a lawyer for sure, or you may want to speak to an attorney even before then, because an attorney like myself we will often submit a letter called a preservation of evidence letter, asking them to retain important information like surveillance video, like incident reports. Another important thing is staffing records, like how much staff was working at the time that the injury occurred, because sometimes these facilities might not have sufficient staff on board to help all the people who were that are residents of the facility. So those are things that you would be looking for. You don't want to wait too much. You don't want to wait and let too much time go by, because sometimes they'll claim that video gets lost or destroyed, or I've seen cases where they say they've lost or destroyed records even though they're required to under the regulations. And having an attorney on board just to have them preserve evidence makes sense. Obviously, when does an attorney typically get involved? An attorney like myself, we work on a contingency, which means you don't pay any money up front. And it only makes sense generally for us to get involved if there is a serious injury. So if it's like a bruise or a bump type injury, probably not enough. But serious, like chronic injuries, total malnutrition that's causing chronic illness, or a fall that causes a broken bone, those are things where it definitely probably makes sense to speak with an attorney. And most attorneys like myself will do a free consultation. We'll go over your options and tell you, hey, maybe this doesn't make sense to hire an attorney, or you should get another opinion. So those are things to think about. If you're an RCFE or you have a loved one who's an RCFE and you're concerned about their safety, and maybe there was even already an incident, commonly it is a fall, feel free to reach out to my office for that free consultation. You can just go to howelljustice.com and we'll talk then. Thanks. Bye.